Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the ongoing Indian atrocities in the Indian occupied illegally Jammu and Kashmir. Now the interesting factor is that in the recent weeks what we have witnessed that this extrajudicial killing has increased many folds. So many youngsters have been picked up and tortured and later on killed by the Indian military. Other than that, number of missing persons again has started rising. Now this has become a regular feature out there. They're not sparing the youth, even the elderly, women, and on top of that, most of the Hurriyat leaders are in the Indian custody. Whether you talk about Yasin Malik or Shabir Shah Saab, Yasin Malik Saab is not at all well, and he is being in the jail for the last many years. He hasn't seen his family in many years, and unfortunately his health is deteriorating on I would say in each and every passing day. Now we'll definitely talk about that also, but now the occupation of the Indian forces, it seems there are two aspects to it. One, this is something which is beyond their control and the only way forward for the Indian forces to torture and to kill and to create that kind of an impression where people should not even step out of their houses. But remember one thing, this is an indigenous movement. This is the movement for the people, by the people, and when we talk about this homegrown indigenous movement for freedom struggle, it cannot be stopped. It hasn't stopped in the last 75 years. Ever since Pakistan came into being, the problem remained there and the issue is still lying with the United Nations. But whenever you talk to the countries such as United States of America or perhaps other countries which matter in the global businesses, in particular when we talk about politics, they say it's a bilateral issue. It should be solved between India and Pakistan. Whereas in reality, this is a pending issue in the United Nations where, according to the wish and the will of the people, this issue should be taken care of. But this is not happening. This is the most unfortunate part. But before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that.
Indian troops backed and enforced by Narendra Modi's fascist regime in their fresh acts of state terrorism martyred 4 Kashmiri youth during cordon and search operations in 2 different districts of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. All parties' Hurriyat conference spokesman expressed serious concern over surge in state terrorism unleashed by Narendra Modi-led fascist Indian government across the territory and urged international community to play a role in the resolution of Kashmir dispute. Pakistan has always been fearlessly vocal regarding fascist Modi regime's atrocities in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir in the realm of state-sponsored terrorism, and in this regard, Pakistani Ambassador Munir Akram in United Nations, while talking in the Humanitarian Affairs segment of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, called for the humanitarian assistance for the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, saying that they are oppressed daily by 900,000 Indian troops. Moreover, while exercising the right of reply, Pakistan's representative Saima Salim schooled Indian representative in the United Nations by saying that the Jammu and Kashmir is not and has never been part of India's territory, as multiple United Nations resolutions define it as a disputed territory. On the other hand, in a statement released by Ministry of Foreign Affairs Pakistan, extrajudicial killing of 4 Kashmiris in fresh acts of state-sponsored terrorism by Indian occupation forces in Pulwama and Baramulla districts of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir was severely condemned. The statement said that since India's illegal and unilateral actions of 5th August 2019, more than 636 Kashmiris have embraced martyrdom in fake encounters and so-called cordon and search operations. The statement added that in this year alone, 113 extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris have been recorded. In this statement, Pakistan reiterates its call for investigation of extrajudicial killings in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir by establishing an independent commission of inquiry as recommended by the Office of United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in its Kashmir reports of 2018 and 2019.
Now to talk about this, we have with us in our studio, on my right is Dr. Owais bin Wasi, Kashmiri leader. Thank you very much, Wais Saab, for taking out your time and talking to us. We also have with us Dr. Asma Shakir Khawaja Saiba. She is the Executive Director of CISS, AJ&K. Ma'am, pleasure to have you in the program. Thank you so much for your time as well. And we'll also be talking to Mushaal Hussein Malik, the Chairperson for Peace and Culture Organization and wife of senior Hurriyat leader Yasin Malik. And we'll inquire about Mr. Malik's health and the ongoing situation. Now, putting the first question to you, sir. In the recent weeks, what we have witnessed, this extrajudicial killing has in fact skyrocketed. Many people have been killed in fake encounters. Youngsters have been picked up, and I would consider them in the list of missing persons now because their families do not even know where they are. So, no discrimination at all, but even children are being tortured, women are being tortured, elderly are not being spared either. I mean, this is not something new, but what I'm saying that current velocity that we used to see has gained a lot of momentum, and during the last few weeks in particular. What's exactly going on out there?
As we have just heard in this report that 636 people, they embraced martyrdom since 2019, 5th August in 2019. And in this year, the
2022,
113, unfortunately.
Yes.
So this phenomenon, unfortunately, is continuing unabated. And after this 5th August 2019, it has been intensified. I think that what Modi regime, abetted by its security advisor Ajit Doval, try to subdue the sentiment of freedom among the youth, among the people of Kashmir. I don't think that they will be successful in subduing and in subjugating the people of Kashmir. As you have mentioned in your earlier remarks that they could not be successful in 75 years. So I think this is not the exact span 75 years, it goes beyond centuries, ago since 1931, and if we can go back to 1831 and 32. So this sentiment is very old, the sentiment to fight against occupation, sentiments fight against oppression. So I think that this is inherent in the genes of Kashmiri, and that will continue it until and unless Kashmiris get freedom from Indian occupation. So I think that this violence, this intensity, that is very tragic, very painful, very unfortunate to us, but I think that it will one day bear fruit. But in this particular time, I think that those elements, those quarters, those countries, those institutions who are silent, it's a question mark for them. That people are being killed in one part of the world, and they are silent. They are not raising voice against Indian occupation for whatever the reasons, economic or whatever. So this duality, this duplicity,
double standards,
I think it's dangerous for the region and for the world at large, because this is not a simple territory. This is a territory surrounded by 3 nuclear powers. So this should not be condoned. It should not be taken for granted. It should not be taken as an issue, as a routine matter. It's a nuclear flashpoint. And I'm not saying it. Bill Clinton said it. So I think we need to, and the world bodies need to understand the gravity, seriousness of this issue.
I totally agree with you. And now let me take the same point to Ma'am Asma Khawaja Sahiba. Ma'am, since you have worked so much on this issue, you've written books, you have been writing about it in the columns, you have been presenting this case in various television talk shows. Now, ma'am, one thing which I fail to understand, whenever there is an issue in Kashmir, not even a single Western media, ma'am, talks about it. Or if it is related to Palestine, again the same problem. But ma'am, when you talk about Ukrainian issue, honestly speaking, you switch on any Western, European or American channel, ma'am, you'll only see the Ukrainian issue being discussed, Vladimir Putin being blamed for everything, and they're setting a certain narrative. Now, ma'am, this clearly shows the double standards of the West. So that means that no matter what we do, can we conclude this, that the West is actually siding with India in this issue?
Very rightly pointed out, Faisal. But actually, it is not like West is siding with, but problem is the media is a commercial entity, as we know, and they only publish or telecast things which have audibility and this special viewership among their audience. So that is why, and then we all know that unfortunately the Palestinian issue or Kashmir issue has are victim of this white supremacy, where the misery and the brutality carried on against the Asians or Muslims, unfortunately, does not have that much acceptability and audibility in Western media, because commercial interests are always there. So, but here, I myself, I read an article a year back in New York Times, which was written by an Indian, but the title of the article was "The Kashmir, the most dangerous place for the journalists." So we cannot say that there is a complete blackout regarding news related to illegally Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir or Palestine, but definitely the Western media is not paying or does not paying that much attention which they are actually paying to the Ukraine crisis. But I also believe that there is no comparison between different conflicts. Whatever they're doing or how they are presenting Ukraine as a student of perception building, I have certain observations regarding that. But the issue is our issue of discussion is the state-sponsored terrorism in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir by India. So Indian state-sponsored terrorism, that is one thing I would like to clear, that state-sponsored terrorism is not only a something physical or coercive. It can be playing with the mindset. It can be inculcating fear among the local public. It can be the economic sending economic hitmen to destroy the economy of the occupied territory. So how India's state-sponsored terrorism is multi-layered. It is about forceful constitutional changes without the
Yes.
consent of indigenous Kashmiris. It is about ethnic and religious cleansing. It is creating fear among the Kashmiri population. It is political remapping. The delimitation is also a state-sponsored terrorism, which aims
Absolutely,
at silencing
absolutely.
the voices, silencing the opinion, silencing the force of Muslim Kashmiris. It is then the use of excessive torture and violence. It is only one form of state-sponsored terrorism. Then human rights violations, economic terrorism, identity politics, and electoral engineering. All that is going on simultaneously in illegally occupied, in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And as we see not recently now, 2 years back, India revoked the Article 370 from Indian Constitution. So India is constitutionalizing the state-sponsored terrorism as well, because without the consent of local people or indigenous public, people of occupied territory, they deleted or seized the only cord which was connecting India and the illegally Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And through seizing or deleting or revoking that only Article 370 that connects Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and India, they actually, as per international law now, actually the Indian forces are the forces of hostile power. Indian army, Indian forces deployed in illegally occupied Indian Kashmir are hostile army as per international law. But unfortunately, very subtle, in a subtle manner, India, through using diplomatic measures, perception building, with the coercive, or I would say proactive diplomacy, they created a false bubble of disinformation, as if the revocation of Article 370 has actually made illegally Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir part of India, a legitimate part of India, which is not the case. But unfortunately, that truth is not being disseminated in a proper manner so that we could dilute that bubble of disinformation. See, there are 900,000 Indian forces deployed in illegally Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir just to inculcate fear among the local Kashmiris. Just for the reason that local Kashmiris should not ask for their right,
Ma'am,
should
these are
not
brave
ask.
sons of the soil and they are fighting for a very, very legitimate cause,
Yeah,
a very noble
exactly.
cause. They are
Yes,
there to
Indian
safeguard their
Indian
future
state.
generations. Unfortunately, if this RSS phenomena continues, this
Yes,
Hindutva
yes,
mindset
yes.
prevails in India, I'm not even sure what would be the life like for Muslims or for non-Hindus, let me put it this way. Because it's
Indian
no more
state.
limited to Kashmir, ma'am. Kashmir is an ideal
Yeah.
example where they have, in fact, identified ways to torture,
Illegal
how to suppress the
occupation.
people, but they have been unsuccessful, ma'am, so far.
Yes,
Because if they were
yes.
successful, things would have been different. They have tried their level best, to change the mindset through disinformation. You mentioned about the proactive diplomatic efforts by the Indians falsely are unfortunately accepted by the Western world. You spoke about the commercialism in media, ma'am, that's the reality as well. You also mentioned about the ethnic and religious cleansing. Ma'am, that has been going on for last God knows how many years. Look at the Eastern India, ma'am, those seven sister states as they call them. What is happening to the Muslims out there? Remapping you mentioned, delimitation. And on top, when we talk about the electoral engineering, that has been going on for quite some time. But now, another very important factor which I would like you to throw light on is that the Pakistan rather, they have reiterated call for an independent commission to investigate this extrajudicial killing. So this is not the first time that we have asked. This seems to me like an SOP. You know, whenever something is going to happen, we'll come up with a narrative that, see, we want a commission to, but sir, nothing is happening. They don't even let the military observers go there and see what's going on out there. Forget about the media or anybody who is independent for that matter. Yes, they took some of the ambassadors and from various countries and showed them exactly those areas where they wanted to show them. So, I mean, this is nonsense.
Exactly, you're right that the report that or the demand that Pakistan is advancing is not in fact the Pakistani demand. This is the demand of United Nations Human Rights Council in the two consecutive reports, 2018 and 2019. So this is an international independent organization's report which India is refusing to pay attention to. So Pakistan is just drawing attention of India and of other countries, other organizations, that these are the reports and compliance should be made and compliance should be taken by India. And similarly, it has also been referred that this report also calls to establish an inquiry commission to investigate these extrajudicial killings, these forced disappearances, these fake encounters. But India is not going to do that. India is
So
not
they have
ready
shut
to
down
do
so
that.
many offices of the human rights organizations in India. You know that, right?
Yes, exactly.
This is the kind of mindset the Indians have currently.
Yes, and what you have just mentioned, that is Kashmir is just a case study, just an example what India is doing to the Muslims in general, to the Muslim women, to the Kashmiri Muslims, Kashmiri youth, Kashmiri women in particular.
Muslims in particular and non-Hindus in general.
Yes, exactly. All the minorities, and especially Muslims are at the receiving end of these hate mongers. And this is, for example, look at India, what they are doing with the Muslims, bulldozing their houses now currently. And this is not what I say is not this is exactly not the bulldozing of houses of Muslims, but I think this is bulldozing of Indian Constitution. This is bulldozing of so-called clamor of democracy, secularism, and all the credentials which India espouses internationally. This is being bulldozed. This is not the bulldozing of the Muslim houses in India. And this is a systematic and consistent policy and consistent efforts by India since 2014, which are being made. You can take number of examples. For example, now recently they have identified all the identity markers of Muslims. For example, they have identified 5,000 mosques, and they were claiming that these mosques should be demolished.
Yes.
So, and after that, the
following what they did to Babri Mosque?
Babri Mosque in 1992. But this is for the first time that we have seen silver lining from GCC countries, from Arab world, and now India is feeling heat because of some economic compulsion.
Sir, interestingly, derogatory remarks for the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is not at all acceptable to anybody, whether it's Pakistan or any Muslim sitting anywhere in the world, sir. So Qatar, Kuwait, even Saudi Arabia, UAE, they took a stand, and that means a lot, because if they are huge trading partners, eventually under the pressure because of these countries, the BJP government had to decide to look after those two characters who were involved in this. What I'm saying is, sir, that targeting Muslims, and just because they know their pulse, that this is when they will get aggravated, this is what is going to make them pinch. But now the most important factor is that I think there has to be a collective effort. OIC has done a lot. Arab League should put their house in order, I would say, and come up with a joint declaration, and perhaps a couple of other countries, even G6 countries. They are so important because they are the trading partners, and they have got lots of investments going on. So many people from India are working in these countries, so remittance and everything. I think it is not only now the duty of Pakistan being a country that took the Indians took the case, but we like Pakistan, India, and the Kashmiris, they were the three major stakeholders. They should decide how to move forward. It can't be a unilateral decision by the Indians to do whatever they want to do.
Exactly. Yes, you are right that this is not the only responsibility of Pakistan. This is the responsibility of the Muslim world in particular, and the global community, global world, powerful capitals in general. And as we have just mentioned about these the heat and the reaction and response by GCC countries, Arab, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, Bahrain, so Turkey also. So for the first time we have observed that India becomes cautious about it. It becomes cautious in terms of the
but that's what I'm saying, because the issue was related to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, not regarding Kashmir. Statements should come, because whenever a Muslim gets hurt, sir, the entire Ummah feels the pain. This is how Islam is. I mean, collective, to look after each other's interest, to help each other. This is what we have been taught ever since we were born, sir. That we are like, this is called the brotherhood.
Exactly. But
when this brother is going to be challenged, I mean, sir, then they will start targeting each and every ethnic hub, and this is what they have done. I mean, I was surprised to know when this Article 370 is abrogated, if you remember, on 5th of August, a few years back, and later on what we all got to know was, interestingly, that now they have started targeting other minorities. They have started targeting particular Muslim groups also, those who are living close to the border of Bangladesh, Rohingyas for that matter, so many other families who were Christians. Now, how can somebody provide these certificates of their great-grandparents?
Exactly.
I mean,
Assam.
Exact, Assam.
Yes.
Another issue.
Yes, they, Parsis, Jains, Dalits, they all are at receiving end. But particularly when it comes to Muslims, they are the targets. They are the only targets and the sole targets of their hate, of their the agenda that they have. Not that agenda is something suspicious, that is enshrined in their manifesto, that is enshrined in their party program. So that is there. So the For example, if you see the...
Sir, if you allow me, sir, Dr. Sahab, we have been joined in by Mushaal Malik Saiba, Mushaal Hussein Malik, Chairperson, Peace and Cultural Organization, and wife of senior Hurriyat leader Yasin Malik. Assalamu alaikum ji.
Ji, walaikum salam.
Ma'am, a pleasure to have you in the program, and thank you so much for taking out your time and talking to us. Now, ma'am, first of all, I would like to ask about the health, overall health of Mr. Yasin Malik, ma'am. Any updates? What's going on? Are you in contact in one way or the other?
No, unfortunately, his health is quite fragile because he's been kept in a death cell and in solitary confinement with two death sentences imposed upon him on 25th of May with rigorous imprisonment. And it's a horrifying situation because he's not being allowed to stay in touch with his family. He's spoken to my sister-in-law once on the phone, and she was telling the message that she conveyed to us through my sister-in-law is that he's fine and his health is not weak, but his health is weak, but his morale is really high. And for him, frankly speaking, sacrificing his life for such a big goal, I think it doesn't mean anything to him. For him, the ultimate goal is freedom for the Kashmiri people, and he's ready to, sacrifice his life for it because he's not being given any opportunity to speak. But as a wife and as our leader of this movement, we're deeply concerned that, all his legal rights have been snatched with this fabricated case charges of terrorism against the peaceful political leader of Kashmiris, and the way he's being kept, being physically and mentally tortured without being given any medical care. His life is at high risk right now, and we don't expect any form of justice coming from the Indian kangaroo courts.
Now, ma'am, obviously false charges were framed against him, and he was convicted for that. I mean, and he did not even appeal because he's a brave man. He understands that there's nothing going to be changed. But, ma'am, being a wife and being a mother of that little child, you have the right to sort of go to any human rights foundation or even the Court of Justice in Hague.
Yes.
That is another option, ma'am. Do you think these could be utilized? These options could be in place at some stage, because
yes,
if you totally depend on the Indians or the kind of mindset that's prevailing in Delhi at the moment, one thing is for sure, nothing is going to happen.
I agree with you. There are quite a few options to take this issue internationally because basically it is the state of India that has decided to punish the Kashmiri leadership. Yasin Saab is in the death cell, Asian Rabi is in Tihar, Shabir Shah Saab is in Tihar. Their health is fragile. Ashraf Sarai Saab was poisoned in jail in Jammu. What happened with Saeed Ali Gilani Saab, what they did with his grave is literally a sub-jail of the Indian Army right now. And the only avenues some of the avenues that we have right now, which we're exploring with our lawyers, is taking this matter to the International Court of Justice. In a similar pattern as the Indians took the case of Kulbhushan to get access to Kulbhushan through his wife and counsel access of his wife and his mother, but the member state has to take it. We can't go there individually. That is one of the options that we are discussing with the Foreign Office. The second option is demanding from the UN Commission of Inquiry on this particular case, and then drafting a strong case against the human rights violation according to Geneva Conventions and also the UDHR. Because, when you talk about this, because it's a lawfare that's being committed, especially after 5th of August, and these cases, these fabricated cases. So all these draconian laws, including the one that he's charged in this case is UPA, and then there's TADA, there's POTA, there's PSA, all slapped against him and others in various other cases. All these laws have been nullified, and they were the colonial laws of 1860 during the British rule in the subcontinent. And the British government has repealed these laws decades ago. So I'm surprised that what is the legitimacy, because in the Indian Constitution of 1950 also it's violating this application of these draconian laws because there's a time bar, they're expired. these laws. So, on what legal grounds is India practicing them? And then, secondly, we can challenge this in the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the treatment being meted against Yasin Sahab and the other Kashmiri political prisoners, taking it to the People's Tribunal internationally, and various other forums that are still, in discussion right now.
Ma'am, currently, obviously, I'm sure that your family is going through a lot of pain and torture because he is in the jail, he's not well, and there's no information as such that is coming out. But when we saw those visuals when he was taken into custody, rather he was in custody, but he was taken from the court when he was being put in that prison van, he looked very weak, and obviously he wasn't well at all. Ma'am, now as uh, as a family member, as somebody who's been struggling, all his life for the freedom of the Kashmiri people, he has given his life, entire youth and everything. Ma'am, what sort of a support are you getting from Pakistan in particular, ma'am, and Kashmir in general?
I think right now it's very important to highlight this case as complete political vendetta, fabricated charges, the way Nelson Mandela at one time was declared a terrorist. Later on, the world, recognized him as the icon of peace, liberty, and nonviolence and freedom. So I think history is repeating itself. But even in that case, that Nelson Mandela was given the right to defend himself. But over here, his counsel also got mysteriously brain hemorrhage. And then when Yasin Malik decided that he's going to contest this case on his own and defend himself, he was not given this right to even speak. So it's completely one-sided decision, and the negative propaganda that's being played around in the Indian media has been that he's pleaded guilty, because there's three things: either it's confession, or it's submission, or it is pleading guilty. He has not done any of the three. The only thing that he has admitted to is that he is the icon of the peaceful struggle of Kashmiris, and he is the face of that movement. So if that is a crime, then he's going to keep committing that crime again and again. So this is something which we need to propagate internationally on all international human rights forums, and I expect the government of Pakistan also to take, notice of the situation. And they're sending letters, but we need to do a lot more than that. On an emergency basis, to hire expertise of international law experts and criminal defense lawyers to look at the matter, because Pakistan is a party to this dispute, and we do not fall under the Indian Penal Code, because we fall under international jurisdiction, because we are not a part of India. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your comments. Now, coming to you, Asma Khawaja Saiba, you heard what the lady said. I mean, inhuman, whatever is going on. This young Hurriyat leader gave all his life for this particular cause, ma'am, and he is not in a good state at the moment as we speak. He's been charged with false, issues, and finally they believe that he should be convicted, and after the conviction, he was handed over this death sentence, not once, twice, and then fine on top. Now, ma'am, do you think this is a legitimate case study when it comes to a story like this, and we can take it up to the International Court of Justice and put this issue up to them?
Definitely, Yasin Malik and his non-violent struggle for the people of illegally Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir is accepted, is recognized by the whole world. So definitely Yasin Malik's case, we can take up that case to International Court of Justice. We can seek the facilitation or help of international law. But we need to be prepared, we need to be well articulated before taking such measure, because we all know what happened in the Kulbhushan Yadav case as well, that international, we cannot expect justice from them, 100% justice. There can be a probabilities, few percent probabilities that we may seek justice from those international courts. So that is why we should be prepared that I believe that with full preparation we should move to International Court of Justice. But any negative remark or any negative decision can be counterproductive for our interest as well. So that is why we should go definitely, but will with full swing and complete preparation. And here I would like to mention that the irony, the case, the torture, their behavior, state behavior towards Yasin Malik is a definitely a complete example that how Indian government is silencing the peaceful political voices of Kashmiri leaders and Kashmiris themselves by making an example or by creating an example out of Yasin Malik, who always or for at least last decade, who's pursuing the non-violent ways to seek justice and to support Kashmir cause. This treatment to Yasin Malik is an example for the rest of the Kashmiri population that even if they would ever speak for, or they even non-violently or politically, which is the basic human right of everyone, including Kashmiris, they would try to seek justice for their nation. They would be made, the Indian state would make an example out of them, and that is what we can see for last 75 years, whether it was the Jammu genocide of 1975, it killed millions of Muslims were killed in the hands of Hindu radicals or Hindutva proponents or RSS terrorists. So, or it is throughout for last 75 years the way Indian government is silencing Kashmiri voices. And now recently under Modi, the use of pellet guns, non-availability of justice, issue of, as you mentioned, issue of missing persons, the issue of half widows, the war crimes, the use of rape as a weapon of war is a crime, as a war crime.
Absolutely,
as per
ma'am.
international
Very, very
law,
unfortunate, but that's the truth. Yes.
And there were 11,247 intentional rapes by Indian armed forces during last few years. And why can't we can go to not to the International Court of Justice, but International Criminal Court to seek justice that Indian army is using rape as a weapon of war against poor Kashmiris. Use of torture or excessive torture is a tool of war used by Indian occupying forces. There are so many ways when they are creating deterrence against Kashmiri population that even if you will speak the truth, we will.
Madam, can you imagine once Mushaal Malik was telling me?
Yesterday, I read an article in BBC that bulldozer are sign of industrial growth, how it has become a sign of oppression in India. So this is what international media is writing, that bulldozer is a sign of oppression in India now. And this is how the threat to use excessive, non-proportional punishment is a tool for Indian military or Indian government to silence all the oppressed voices.
This is exactly
in India,
state terrorism, ma'am.
in Kashmir. Yeah?
Absolutely. Ma'am, I was telling you about a story which was shared to me by Mushaal Malik, and she said that the dogs who were carrying rabies, they were, they were allowed to move around in the streets where Muslim majority areas were. So that no person comes out for the protest because of these dogs, and and then on top there was no medical facility, so God forbid if a dog bites you, you will have rabies within the next 48 hours, ma'am. I mean, look at their approach. Nobody would even think of torturing somebody to that extent.
Can I add a little?
Please,
this approach of excessive use of torture is there because Indian government has created laws in which there is impunity for the perpetrators. If Indian army or Indian armed forces, they conduct any mistreatment, torture, abduction, rape, killing of any innocent Kashmiri, there is no trial, no law applicable on that.
So actually it's the other way around. The criminals are protected and the innocent people are not.
Yes, that too through law. There are like more than at least 10 laws which protect Indian army from any legal action, whatever. They can destroy their houses, they can barge in their houses without an arrest warrant, they can abduct anyone for 3 years. Like there is a whole, we can do a whole program on explaining those laws which allow Indian
Madam,
Army
we will
to
definitely
act
do one
like
show
a
because
colonial
let
forces.
the world know what's going on out there. I mean, if the
Yeah.
Western media is not, talking about what's going on in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, we will. This is our,
Yes.
I mean, this is the purpose. This is what we should do. We should tell the
Exactly.
world what's going on out there. I mean, you just mentioned that every Indian soldier or policeman, whosoever is, I mean, forget about
Protected
conviction,
under
whosoever
law.
is involved in the killing and torturing of these innocent people, he is protected by law, by the Indian
Yes.
law. So you can't even touch him. They are untouchables. That's the problem.
Yes. Yes.
And definitely we
The
will, ma'am,
same,
we will definitely do.
Faisal, the same Brahman mindset that whatever Brahman would do, he can get away with that. And this is what India is doing in Kashmir. The poor Kashmiris, they are treating them as untouchables, Shudras, and the Indian Army, Indian Armed Forces, any Hindu, any person from Indian government, they are the Brahmins, untouchables. And so no one can ask them. There is, Faisal, there is not a single incident when a perpetrator, Indian Army personnel was trialed under Indian Penal Code for carrying out atrocities and brutalities against poor Kashmiris, whether those crimes they actually fall under the war crimes, the crimes against humanity.
Madam, these are
And
all the untold stories, and I think the
yes,
West should be told. Forget about the issue of Kashmir for a second, ma'am. Human rights, I think that's the most important factor, ma'am. Everybody has a right to live according to his own wishes and in accordance with the law. But if people are
Yes.
being tortured, their women are being raped, their children are being picked up and they go missing, their men are being killed in fake encounters. I mean, the demographic changes are taking place. On top of that, this misinformation or disinformation, as they call it, that's been promoted all over the world. On top of that, you're talking about so many other issues. I mean, I think one has to draw attention of the West towards the human rights issue. That should be
yes,
the first and foremost
yes,
important area
yeah,
to in
the,
fact,
the fin-
bring into light. Yes, ma'am, you wanted to add
the
something?
economic torture is there, Faisal. In illegally Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the unemployment ratio is 25%. Well, whereas in the rest of the India it is only 7%. So this is how they are. They want them to. They want Kashmiris to live much below from the poverty line, so that they can only think about food instead of freedom. And
Apple
still,
orchards were
we
also
should
destroyed. I
salute
mean, the
the
livelihood of
Kashmiri
the Kashmiri
brothers
Muslims are
that
being
still
targeted,
they
in
are.
fact.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Now,
I,
coming to you,
so
sir.
the situation, whatever Indian Army is doing, it is not acceptable under any law or under any ethical value in the world.
Totally agreed. So, last comment from you before I wind it up.
You know, as
You heard, I mean, this
as
is such
Dr.
heart-wrenching and so painful. Honestly, I was totally out of words to further add anything.
Dr. Khawaja has very extensively, from the perspectives, legal perspectives, local and international, she has explained the whole phenomenon, what is happening in India. I think what we need to do is that all these things which she pointed out and we have been discussing in different programs, I think they need to be highlighted, they need to be projected before the concerned organizations, concerned quarters, as for example, that the laws that she was referring, for example, POTA, TADA, Armed Forces Special Power Act, PSA. So all these laws, there is no place of these law if we compare it with.
They are not even laws.
Exactly. So what is, so the laws which she referred, which is being practiced in India against Muslims. So now we can see is the whole apparatus of the state is involved. Media is involved, judiciary is involved, unfortunately, state is involved. So this is not, just a BJP's
It's a
phenomenon.
very well thought out
Well
plan.
thought out, well coordinated, concerted, and targeted, in which all the state apparatus is involved. So I think that needs to be debunked, that needs to be exposed, that this is not an issue of one political party or the ruling party. This is unfortunately has been permeated into the state apparatus, into the
Absolutely,
state
absolutely.
institutions. So that needs to be exposed, and the world should be, should be drawn attention towards those, provisions which are there in their own organizations. For example, that human rights organizations, international covenants, Geneva Convention that was just
Absolutely,
referred
sir.
by that. I think that we need to develop, we need to frame our case based on these legal underpinnings, legal
Absolutely.
provisions.
So, I mean, one has to be proactive, not reactive. Reactive approach is not going to give you anything. It hasn't given you anything so far. So there has to be a different philosophy attached to it, and then plan it out well and then execute it. Anyway, sir, thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for your presence. Dr. Khawaja, was a pleasure having you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Always good to have you on the show, ma'am. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow, 8 to 5 p.m. Till then, take care of yourself.